Hello and welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to films from around the world. I am not Adam Lundy, but Chris is with me today. Adam is out having his baby, so congratulations to him. So you're going to be stuck with one of us doing this introduction, not as well as Adam does. So how are you doing, Chris?
That was beautiful,
Thank you.
Zach. The Zachary K. Bryant, ladies and gentlemen, MC to the stars. Man, I am doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. I was sitting there thinking about it. I was like, I have never been on a one-on-one podcast with either one of y'all because I've missed two episodes. So you and Adam have had two episodes by yourselves, but I've
Yeah.
always had all three of us here when I've done it. So this is a little different for me.
Um, well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, you're right. We've done two, and then
Or is
I
it
was
three?
there.
Did I miss 2 weeks? I missed 2 weeks. So I missed the very first episode, and then I
Yeah.
missed 2 weeks this year. So it's actually been three.
Yeah. Was there, why was I solo for a few weeks without you or Adam too for the Criterion episodes? What was that about?
Oh my God, I'd have to go back through our messages.
I can't remember. There was like a
Was that
period where it
Adam's
was,
wedding, right? Adam's wedding.
oh, maybe so, yeah.
Adam does a lot more exciting things in his life than we do, so we're usually here.
Um, that's funny, man. Well, what have you been watching these days? Have you anything other than what we're going to be talking about today?
I've gotten a few things in. I got good old Gene Dillman in, which I won't talk about here. I'll have plenty to say on Friday. So if anybody wants to join us and hear my very long-winded rants about the film, feel free to jump on in to Criterion Conversations where we do our film club. Other than that, I was sitting here. I watched a movie with Alicia the other day. I've seen it a bunch of times, but I feel like it's your type of jam. As I watched Shoot 'Em Up. Have you seen that before?
Oh, wow. That brings back some memories. Is that does it have Paul Giamatti in it?
Yeah, and Clive Owen. Yeah. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
the gun fetishist movie, like well before like John Wick existed.
Right,
The
right.
movie's so
Yeah,
good. I've
it is.
watched. It's so good.
It's one of those ones that probably flew under the radar for some people because, I mean, Clive Owen's a legitimate action star, but Giamatti certainly is not.
Well,
Um,
well, Giamatti, me and my girlfriend were talking about this. He is such an interesting actor because honestly, he is so talented as like a serious actor. He
right.
was nominated for the holdovers and everything else. But
Hmm.
when he's doing that off the wall thing, he's also really good at it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm sure you've seen Big Fat Liar. I feel like you're in the age group.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I remember not that it was all him, but Sideways is the movie I remember where he
Hmm.
plays sort of like a straight man to Thomas Hayden Church. But he plays it really well. He's that movie's freaking hilarious. Have you seen that one, the wine movie?
Oh man, it's been a while. I've seen it, and I distinctly remember the DVD cover because I swear there was like 100 copies of it
Yeah,
at
yeah,
my
yeah,
local
yeah.
movie gallery when it was came out.
Well, it did. So I was working at Blockbuster Video when it came out, and like it just kept getting rented. I think it was one of those ones that kind of had a word of mouth because Thomas Hayden Church is so freaking funny in that movie. Um, and it kind of came out of nowhere because they were like he hadn't acted in a big role in a while, and people were like, "Damn, that guy's hilarious." But Giamatti was great in that too. But shoot 'em up, man! I'll have to go back and watch that again. It's been years.
Yeah, honestly, I'm impressed. Like watching, I understand. I kind of get why it wouldn't be for everyone, but I feel like you would appreciate it. It's got like a lot of good gags in it. Um, and it's basically a Looney Tunes sort of
Yeah,
episode. Like that's the whole
exactly,
thing.
exactly, exactly. That's
So, what about
hilarious.
you? I haven't watched a whole lot beyond what we're talking about, and everything else has been kind of mess. So, what have you been watching?
Hmm. I saw a 3.5 hour movie on the plane that just came out, a new release. Oh, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, what'd you think?
Great, amazing. It kind of blows me away that Scorsese's making movies like this at 110 years old.
And not only that, he is now like what was that ridiculous stat I saw the other day? He is now the first director to be have a movie nominated for 10 Oscar nominations and win zero 3 times. Like that's insanity.
Oh, you're saying Flower Moon was nominated for 10 and didn't win, And this has
Nothing.
happened to him 3 times.
Yeah, it happened with him with The Irishman and
Oh
Gangs of New
shit.
York.
Oh shit. Uh,
It's like,
Gangs of New York was maybe one of his best. That I mean, just from like a accomplishment perspective, like what he was able to do with that.
yeah,
Um,
I think what really loses that movie is I think Leo's a bit miscasted in Gangs of New York, and I don't think Cameron Diaz is very strong. But I mean, Daniel Day Lewis is of course awesome in that movie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He really attaches himself to DiCaprio and De Niro, huh?
Yeah,
I
and I think it works in Flower Moon. Like I think it's like I think Flower Moon is maybe DiCaprio's best since maybe Wolf of Wall Street.
yeah, I think DiCaprio's perfect in that. The first 20 minutes, I did not like De Niro at all in Flower Moon, but as he became more sinister,
Mm.
uh, I, I liked him. I thought he was probably the right person for it. He I think he showed off some amazing acting as the movie went on. But at first I was like, seriously, like you're gonna put De Niro as like this Oklahoma like sweet old uncle? Come on, man.
But it ends up like
Um,
working to the movie's benefit because you're like something doesn't seem like quite right. Like
no, totally. And it's basically just like a mafia role for De Niro by the end. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler, right? But you start to see these like layers, and he's not too far from a crime boss, and I think he pulls out that evil pretty well. Um, the I don't know if it's from the book or the movie, but like the way that story is just like unfolds is brilliant. Like I love it.
well, they did it quite a bit different from the book because
Okay.
it's been a while since I've read it. I actually wish Adam was here because he read it very recently. But most of it takes is in the perspective of the FBI agent played by Jesse Plemons. So basically, when he shows up, it's kind of like him. It's basically like how he uncovers what's going on, where the film kind of takes it more chronologically
Okay.
of the time before the FBI show up to when they do and afterwards. Because DiCaprio was originally supposed to play Jesse Plemons' role
Okay.
when it was originally written to be like that.
Yeah. I don't know who else would have. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody that could have done a good job in Leo's role, but he did a good job in it, so it's fine. Yeah, that movie's awesome. I hope people see it. I don't think the runtime becomes too much of a factor. Like it didn't feel overly slow or um, you know, I thought it was fine. It kept me engaged on the plane ride.
Yeah, and I mean
I'm
it's not as bad as like Irishman. I feel like Irishman, like as much as I like that movie, I feel its runtime by the end of it. I'm like,
Dude, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I always feel like I'm dogging on Vertigo when I talk about The Irishman. Like it's okay, but like I don't it's nowhere near his best movie. And like I don't quite understand the acclaim it got. That movie drags.
I think it wanted to be like what Unforgiven was to Clint Eastwood. Like if this was
Mm.
Scorsese's goodbye to the gangster thing,
Oh, okay.
maybe
Okay,
in
sure.
retrospect it'll look really cool, but it's like I don't know if it really is it for him. And I don't know. Like as much as Scorsese gets known for the mob stuff, I actually don't think it's like necessarily his best stuff. So because he's had so much variety in his career that it
No,
doesn't
I
feel
was
like Clint Eastwood saying goodbye to westerns.
so there's an episode of our podcast. Was it last episode or there's an episode where you were talking about sorry, it's running together in my head because I was just listening to some of our old episodes on the plane. I can't remember if it was our most recent one or if it was an older one. But you made the comment that your favorite Scorsese, you said there's two kinds of people. There's people that like Scorsese and then people that like Scorsese's gangster movies. Um, and for me, I'm the person who likes Scorsese. Like, I think his gangster movies are fine, but when he's being playful, like Bringing Out the Dead, Last Temptation of Christ, like when he's telling some of these stories, it's just I don't know, it's mind blowing. I think you get to see more of the way his mind works, and like I don't know, he's just a brilliant guy.
Yeah, and I think there's just more unique. It's like you like bring up Last Temptation of Christ. There isn't many movies that look like that, and it's Scorsese is just all over the movie, and I think it brings out a lot of his talent that gets lost in these more grounded like mob stories sometimes.
No, totally. Yeah, I no, I fully agree. In fact, I one day I might recommend that movie, and then maybe one more kind of like heretical Christian movie that's actually not that heretical when you dig into it. Um, Maybe Dogma, as
Dogma,
weird
I
of
love Dogma, man.
yeah. But I would love to do a deeper conversation with y'all on that because I think we've talked about I don't know how much we've talked about religion, but I have that in my background, although I'm not crazy like fanatical these days, but I certainly have that theological background. And I don't think Last Temptation of Christ is controversial at all. I think it's completely misunderstood. Um, and it's quite accurate to the story. And the part that everybody freaks out about is just like this sort of, it's almost like, Scorsese kind of saying like, this is what temptation looks like and going down that rabbit hole. I think it's beautiful. I love that movie.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about controversial, I guess we should talk about what we're here to do for the next few weeks.
Pretty good segue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of controversy, okay, you want to introduce it?
So me and Chris, we brainstormed quite a bit of what to do because we didn't want to leave Adam out of anything we thought he would like really enjoy discussing.
Yeah.
So we were like, you came up with several options, and I think the one that kind of stood out to me, and I think it stood out to you too, is doing the Denmark director Lars von Trier. I'm going to
Yep.
mispronounce it 100 times, so it's fine. And it's similar to our Cubic run. We're going to sit through and we're going to go through his movies in chronological order. I think our exceptions are he has a TV movie he did, which I don't know. Maybe we can talk about that during the Kingdom, but we're going to do the Kingdom, I think, at the very end after we
Yeah,
talk about all of his films. So,
that's right.
yeah. So, otherwise, we're going to do his filmography, feature films in order because this dude made a lot of shorts. When I was like going through, I was like, oh man, he's been making shorts since like the 60s.
Well, it's so weird because you pull up his filmography on IMDb and it's like 51 or something. It's like, whoa, shit. But then you dig into it and I think what was the number we came up with? 15?
15 or 16. I think it depends on how you like count Nymphomaniac. So
Yeah,
it's
there you
not
go.
that many. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, I can't wait for this. I have a kind of an interesting relationship to Lars von Trier because when I was in sort of discovering movies, I know I was in college, right? And I was in college from 2000 to 2005. And in that time, he made some of the movies that really were like, I guess, the ones that he's kind of most well known for. I mean, I guess that's probably not a statement that everybody would agree with. Maybe younger audiences would say that like The House That Jack Built or Antichrist are his most well known. But like for Dancer in the Dark with the soundtrack from Radiohead, that was like a huge hit. Um, and I was like, he hadn't really become a controversial public figure yet. He was just known as like temperamental, but certainly not controversial compared to some of the stuff that he's done recently. But then he made this really interesting kind of movie that I can't wait to watch with you, called The Five Obstructions.
Mhm.
And then he started this whole like dogma thing started to kind of leak out, and that became more popular. And then he made not Manderley, but wait, maybe Manderley. But the
He
one
did
with
I know for Dogma 95, he did Idiots. Wasn't that the one he did for
yeah,
Dogma?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there was one he did that was fully on a sound stage. I don't think it's Manderley. It was the one right before Manderley. Dogville.
Dogville, because he did D Dog like as a short, like as a weird. I don't know if we're talking about that. I have to look at our list again.
I don't
But
think so.
yeah, I don't think we're counting that one. But yeah, he was doing stuff like that right around that time.
And so I saw Dogville, and it's like 3 hours. It should like I thought I was gonna hate it, but by the end I wound up loving it, and I was just like, okay, this guy's awesome. And then he started to speak more, and that's the problem. I think he's misunderstood for a lot of the way he is kind of publicly, but I just think he's a fantastic director, and I can't wait to get into some of these ones today because I think it shows some of that curiosity that he had early on, and like that the way he's really always trying to play with what film can be. So I can't wait to talk about these first three. But yeah, I think the other thing maybe worth mentioning is that if the timing works out and we can do it, we might try to have guest hosts on for some of these episodes. So we've had a couple people say they'd be interested, and so that could be kind of fun as well to get some different perspectives on this dude. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I know mine is a little bit different than yours. I actually have a lot of unfamiliarity with a lot of his early stuff. I watched The Kingdom last year, and that was like until this run, that was the earliest of his stuff I had seen. So my introduction to him was I'm gonna get hopefully not too long-winded here. So when I was in college, I got really into this thing of really wanting to go through the most disturbing movies ever made, and I found this YouTuber called Horrible Reviews, and basically he did specials on going through different very disturbing movies and giving them breakdowns, and I was really just like going through all of them. I went through like Cannibal Holocaust, Human Centipede, and all this other stuff, and one of them was Antichrist. um yeah, and that whole thing, and the whole thing ends up with us watching a Serbian film, and I think that's when I said, you know what, I think I've had enough for a while.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, me and my friend from college, we were watching it, and I think me and her just kind of sat there when Serbian film was over, and I was like, you want to go for a walk? Like, I think we've done this too much this week because we had like exams that week, so there was so much of the week we were just sitting around in my dorm room watching movies, and I was just like, this was a mistake.
That's really funny, man. I kind of had the same experience. I watched Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox back to back. And I remember, I mean, they're both good in their own way, like for what they are, you know? But I just remember afterwards just feeling like heavy. I was like, okay, I need to like take a break from this kind of stuff. I shouldn't do a double feature like that.
No, and I mean it's just like when it hits you and you're like, what am I doing? Like, like
Yeah,
why am I
exactly.
here? And I mean, even like we'll talk about Antichrist, of course, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks from now, but um, that's it's a great movie, at least from my memory. It's a really great movie.
Yeah.
But you get so much slock with that stuff too, and you're like, I don't know why I'm here. Why am I watching this? And you get a little bit of hints of that when you're watching some of even his early stuff, which I guess we'll get into of how much it kind of leads into the stuff I think we're both a little bit more familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I had no context or history or anything with these first three films, so uh, they really surprised me in a way that I think will be fun to talk about. But I don't know if there's anything else we need to do as far as intro. I mean, maybe if this ends up being a popular series, maybe once every other year or something, we might just tell Adam to take a vacation and talk about controversial directors because I think, there's a broader discussion here which I love, which is this idea of like what qualifies as good film, right? And a lot of the highly controversial movies are also really good and like really well made and very thoughtful. Gaspar Noé's comes to mind for sure, right? Like
Mhm.
I'll defend Irreversible to the day I die. Like I understand that movie's hard to watch. I get it, but damn, it's great. Like it's just really well made. And I don't know, like the directors that can balance that, I'm always fascinated with.
Yeah, and especially because you look at both of them, and I think when we get to Europa, there's a whole story about how Spielberg came up to von Trier and offered him Hollywood, basically, and he decided no. And it's wild because you kind of have to have these very artful directors who are just going to sit there and say no to an opportunity just to make stuff like Antichrist in the house that Jack built.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and he's not really done making movies either. Well, I guess possibly depending on how his sickness goes, but um,
Yeah, he
uh,
had the Kingdom was I think the last thing he did.
right. Yeah, and I guess it's possible that he's done. I mean, he has a what's it called? A degenerative disease, right?
I did not. I wasn't aware of that. No, I knew it'd been a while since he'd really done a lot, so that would explain
Is it
it, I guess.
is it ALS or something?
Oh, that'd
I
be
don't know.
rough if it's ALS.
Yeah, there's something I need to. I guess I should have probably done my research on that. But there's something. He does have some kind of degenerative neurological disease, I think, or muscular neurological disease. I can't remember. But, anyways, it's possible that he's not going to make that many more films. So he'd be another one of these directors where this kind of crazy output would be cut short if he only ends up making like 15 or 16 features. But
Which is a good number, but I mean, he's been, let's see, well, like in 1984 is his first feature. So, I mean,
yeah,
that was 40 years ago now.
yeah,
So,
that's right. We're celebrating 40 years, I guess, of
yeah.
Von Trier. Well, do you wanna do the intros and the descriptions and stuff, and then I'll do the where they rank in history, and then we can get into it.
Sure, sounds good to me. So I will the first one we're gonna be talking about, and if anybody expects me to pronounce the Dutch pronunciation of any of these, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. So the first one is the element of crime. Fisher, an ex detective, decides to take one final case when a mysterious serial killer claims the lives of several young girls. Fisher, unable to find the culprit, turns to Osborne, a writer who was once respected for his contributions to the field of criminology. Fisher begins to use Osborne's technique, which involves empathizing with serial killers. However, as the detective becomes increasingly engrossed in the methods, things take a disturbing turn. That's what that movie was. I honest to God did not know what half that movie was about. So I'm glad I read the description now.
You know what? Okay, so well, hold on, before we get into it. So this film is beloved by some, not by all. It's in the top 5,000.
Okay.
Um, it's 4,798. It's up by movies like Long Day's Journey into Night, Darjeeling Limited, Harvey, Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain. So it's pretty, pretty well known, um, pretty well known movies. Get Shorty is up there. Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. So he has good company. I think for a first film, well, I guess I don't want to say too much about the other movies, but the thing that jumped out to me about this one is it's almost like he made this and then went backwards and made a student film. So I want
Thank
to
you. Yeah, yeah. I was like, somebody had told me Epidemic was his first film, I would have believed them.
no,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. This one is a monochromatic um deep dive into like a well-known genre of like a detective kind of genre, but told through the eyes of somebody who is a non-linear storyteller, right? And like
and really like Travasky.
and really liked who?
Stalker dude. I might be saying his name
Oh,
incorrectly.
oh, oh, Tarkovsky. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, for sure.
yeah. Like
Yeah,
really
for
liked
sure.
him.
Yeah, for sure. Uh,
But no, it's
so
it's
go.
a it's a really bold film. Like like when I was sitting there watching it, I was like, I would not have guessed this is somebody, because it feels like there's a lot of confidence behind it. Like
Yeah.
this is not what somebody would usually do as their first one. Like I said, my issues is I had no idea what's going on for half the movie. Because it's, I don't know, is it post-apocalyptic or something? Like I kind of get that's what's going on, maybe, sort of.
Well, that's a common theme in all three of these, right? Is like they're not they're like near reality, right? Which is super interesting. Um, or like slightly hyper reality or something, I think in different ways, right? Um, he I don't I think it is supposed to be a little bit of a different state or future state or something, yeah. But um there to me, well, I don't know if we should just kind of jump right into it, but like there I like this movie. For what it's worth, this was my second time seeing it, and I was able to understand what was going on from start to finish the second time. Um, because the first time I had the exact same reaction as you. I was like, what did I just watch?
Like I
Um,
was like, I know it's a detective story, but I'm like, okay, what are, I was like, I half the time I didn't even know what they were detecting. I was like, what are we here for?
yeah, no, totally. It's actually fairly straightforward story. It's a very simple kind of straightforward story. And I think, to me, like these first three movies were him experimenting in different ways. Um, and this was like kind of him experimenting with what can be done in camera, right? Because he just like what was it? He used like sodium phosphate lighting or something like that that gave it that kind of yellowish
Yeah, yeah.
sepia.
And it's interesting because 7 years, we'll talk about this one more towards the end, but this is, I feel like this is like him practicing to do Europa. Like,
Right,
yeah, because there are times where the color looks kind of normal when it's like in fluorescent lights and stuff like that.
right,
And then we're back to like the sepia tone.
right. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that with Europa because some of the stuff he did, just knowing how he doesn't use effects and like knowing he does everything in camera, I was kind of stunned with some of the stuff he's able to do with Europa, but more on that, I guess, in a second. Um, but so it's the only thing I don't understand still, and I don't know if you have any insights into this. There's this detective is there, right? And he's kind of helping to solve this crime. There's these like young girls that keep dying, and there's this mysterious figure called Harry Gray, kind of like the third man, the character in the third man, where you don't see him throughout the movie, but you keep hearing about him. Becomes like a central point of the plot without ever seeing him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but there's this weird tie-in with the psychiatrist when he's in like Spain or Portugal or something, who's like guiding him through this journey into his memory. And I didn't understand the role of that at all. Like
I, I'll be honest, I didn't either.
Okay,
Especially because there's a lot of like, even though everything takes place in one thing, there's a lot of weird movement of what they talk about. Like the guy starts in Cairo, right? That I'm not wrong about. That's where he
sorry,
was.
maybe Cairo. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and he may have went to Spain too. I honestly,
No,
there's a
no, no. I
lot of
think it's
like move,
Cairo.
and I'll be honest. One of the toughest things for me, and I don't know if we're going to talk about the box set that Curzon, Artificial Eye, who whatever they're called now, put
Hmm.
out. I
Hmm.
really wish they had subtitles even for the English because the accents are very thick in this movie, and I think that's what makes it a little bit harder.
Oh, that's really good to know because I watched this on Mubi because I'm
Yeah, maybe they.
traveling.
I hope they have it because like this one,
They do.
yeah, they only have English if it's in another language.
Dude, I hate when they do that.
I do too, man. Because I was like, the accents are so thick in parts of this, and I'm like, I don't know what they just said, so
And
I'm just like,
like,
I'm just going with it.
not to get on like a DEI soapbox for a second, but like, can you just not understand in 2024 that deaf people like to watch movies too? Like, can we just kind of get past that point? Like, like there's
Especially in
so
like a
many.
noir type movie, like where you need to know information. Like you
Yeah,
need to know.
exactly.
It's not like you can watch this without knowledge and figure it out. It isn't that type of movie.
Ugh, that's so obnoxious. I know subtitling is like expensive or whatever, but like, yeah, the movie one is the transfer from the Criterion box set, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they have the subtitles and everything. It's a shame that Curzon didn't do that, but that's good to know. It was also interesting to me that the movie was so much in English, and I guess that's true for all three of these. But I don't know why he would have made this movie in English, other than for international distribution, I guess.
Yeah, I noticed looking at like when I was going through looking at his stuff, I was like, this dude has mostly done stuff in English.
Yeah,
And it's like I don't know if it was just to attract bigger stars down the road because I mean, everyone goes to like Norway. He doesn't travel to the US. He refuses to travel to the US. So
right.
everybody comes to him and I mean, he gets big stars to do these things.
Yeah,
So I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that helped him or what.
The big you said Norway. I think you mean I mean I don't mean to pick, but you mean
Oh,
Denmark, right? In
yeah,
terms of
Denmark, yeah.
no, no, it's okay. The only reason I say it is, the Danish filmmakers before him that I know, I guess obviously Dreyer is a big one.
Mhm.
I don't know if I can you name I don't know if I can name another one off the top of my head.
I'm gonna get this wrong. Is Refn one? Is Refn
Who?
him? The guy who did Bronson and Drive.
Okay, hold on. Let's
Is
see.
he from there?
Let's see. Uh, so let's see. Eric Balling, Lars von Trier, Thomas Vinterberg is a big one. Yeah, Nicholas Winding Refn is that who you said?
Yeah, for Agfa guy. Yeah.
Okay.
It's probably what you'll
Yeah.
know more from is he's a big part of Agfa. So yeah.
That's right.
Because
What
he's
was
the
the
one who
movie?
liked bat pussy so much.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. Speaking my language.
Yeah, I was like, oh, wait, maybe Drive's not the best one to go for Chris.
I do need to see that eventually, but yeah, yeah, he's a Danish guy as well. But there haven't been like hundreds of Danish
No.
filmmakers, so maybe maybe it's just like this is one thing that I've always been impressed with. And speaking of Norway and Sweden and Denmark, is like if you're born there, you're kind of born to be bilingual, if not trilingual. Like it's just they're very highly educated there.
Yeah, and I mean you're surrounded by like the language barrier. I mean, you're in Eastern Europe. I hope I'm okay to say that. There's so much like language changes right there because you got your Latin languages, you have your Scandinavians one not terribly far away. Then you're
Right.
getting into your Eastern European languages, and I mean it's such a mix all right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And so maybe it just, as part of the culture, he's just naturally very good with language, but it's interesting that this was in English. It's difficult to remember for me, and this is going to become more relevant as we go along, but it's so easy to think of him as German. I guess I don't know if his background is German at all, but like he seems to have a lot of opinions on Germany and German things. I don't know that that's as relevant for um, uh, Element of Crime, so maybe we can hold off on that until Epidemic. But like, I mean, this is pretty straightforward, like detective story, right? I mean, there's a killer. The main actor is this kind of grizzled detective, and there's this kind of identity play that goes on. Did you ever think in the story that he was going to become Harry Gray?
No, no, I did not. I'll be honest, like that's one of the reasons I did want to go back later on. I want to let it rest for a while, but I kind of want to go back knowing what I know at the end and saying,
Yeah,
okay, maybe it's like you, I'll get it a lot better of what's like really going on.
the relationship with I guess the sex worker. What does he call her? Uh, Why am I thinking Anna? It's not Anna, is it?
No, it's
But I mean, it's a pretty central relationship. It's like the main woman in the movie, right?
Kim. Is her name Kim?
Kim,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Mimi
So,
Mimi Lay plays her apparently.
yeah, who is stunning, by the way. But anyways, um, uh, the relationship with her, I was very confused at the first watch. I don't know if but that made a lot more sense. It was a lot more clear the second watch.
I mean, I was just going on. This is the femme fatale with the detective. Like, I just kind of accepted that part. I was like, yeah, okay. Like, this is what it's supposed to be. That's fine. Because
Okay,
I do feel like this is towards the end. I was like, okay, this is a little bit more of a deconstruction of noir, is at least what I was
exactly.
kind of getting as I got to the end. I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to pick up what's really going on.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I read it as well.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, and that's the tough part. And it reminded me a lot since we just did the Kubrick run. That it was kind of interesting to me that it's Kubrick. We had the same complaints where like the first two films were kind of hard to like really talk about plot wise because they aren't the best plotted and they're a little confusing at parts. And then something clicked and he did something like The Killing, and it just like made it like the whole thing made sense. It feel like story structure was there, and I'm kind of feeling the same thing with Von Trier, where the first two I'm just kind of like I kind of get it and I really don't, but I like the vibes, I guess, is what I kind of felt with the first two.
yeah. Um, yeah. I think so too. This is okay. This is maybe a good thing to talk about because having seen Dancer in the Dark and then Dogville and then Antichrist and Nymphomaniac and some of these, I haven't seen House the Jack built, so I'm curious to watch that for this. But um, like his style was so like you can kind of tell a Von Trier movie, right? Like it's like he has this sort of evil that's like present underneath a lot of his stories, and he really like I think pushes on humanity, like the good and the bad inside all of us, and he shows both equally. I think a lot of times. So it's interesting to watch Element of Crime for me because that felt to me a little bit more like what I would have expected as like a first film from a director that went on to make a lot of this stuff. So I can't wait to talk about some of the other ones because they did not. But um, I think this one does a good job of kind of playing with like the good and the bad that's inside this detective, and like and a character that is sort of equally engaged in both parts of that, right?
Yeah, because I mean, especially when you do detective stories, and I couldn't tell you the exact time it changed, but when you look at trying to think of the book series, like Walk Among the Tombstones guy, I wish I could think of his name right now, the guy who wrote all those. He was really that start of like detectives, I guess, before are more the psychopaths want to solve the puzzle, your Perot's, your Sherlock Holmeses, and it slowly shifted into more good men who were corrupted by a horrible world. And there's a lot more drinking, there's a lot more self-hatred. And it's, yeah, I feel like there's a little bit more of that in that type of detective story that makes them a little bit more endearing in a sense.
It no, I agree. Do you there's a bit of a legacy or like a history too with kind of Nordic detective stories. Have you ever heard of a character named Martin Beck?
I really thought you were going to ask me about Harry Hole, and I was like, yes, I've definitely heard of Harry Hole, but no, I've not heard of that one.
uh he's not too far from how I would picture Martin Beck. Like Martin Beck is this very complicated detective who he gets involved in very seedy, like grimy kind of detective things. And there's a bunch of Swedish and like Nordic detective series that have sort of built off of that or followed that guy or built, maybe came out at the same time even. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like Joe Nesbo would fit into that, like the
Yeah,
author Joe Nesbo. I don't
yeah,
know. That's
totally,
most of what his career is.
totally. So this also kind of felt like, especially by the 80s, a lot of those novels had been written. So I also kind of got that vibe a little bit of he was like telling more of like a Swedish detective story. Well, I guess the most famous one is the girl with the dragon tattoo or whatever, right?
Oh yeah. What's his name? Stag. I know his initials are SL, and I'm just Stag something Larson. Stag
Is
Larson.
is it Stig Larsson? I don't
Stig
know.
Larson might be right. Yeah,
Is that it? I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. That fits right into that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it just seems like there maybe I don't even know what it is. Like just maybe it's dark so much of the year there. Maybe they're just like more comfortable kind of exploring like both sides of the psyche. Um, more maybe there's more depression there. I don't know, but yeah, those that style of detective novel is certainly there.
Yeah, I think it helps you with like your bleakness because you get that kind of you get that here when you look at like Alaskan type of mystery novels, like what was one Hold the Dark that came out several years ago. That's just like they got criticized for just being so bleak and
Right.
ambiguous. And I'm like, I feel like that's more common, like what you're talking about when we talk about Denmark and you talk about like really cold and dark places.
We have a lot of people that listen to this from Australia. I have a feeling that Australian crime detective novels wouldn't be so bleak.
No.
It's sunny, like all year there. Be much more happy. Um, just like big action and big heroics. Um, let's see. I don't really know what else there is to talk about too much. I think I know what I wanted to bring up. So, do you have any sense for how do I want to say this? The dialogue in this is very sort of like poetic, right?
Yeah, that might, and I don't want to criticize a guy for this, but it probably is like the most film schoolish part of the first one. Not
Okay.
that it's bad writing. I don't think it's bad at all, but I think it is like that time when you see like young good writers kind of get like a little too waxing poetically with it sometimes. But yeah, yeah, I think so. And I mean, credit to him. He's writing basically this dialogue in his non-primary language. So it's super
True.
impressive anyway. And that could be a
True.
lot of it. Like when it's like that seems like a little too much, but it could be I know formal English better than casual English. So this is just kind of how it comes out.
That's true. But there was a lot of them were kind of like fairy tale-ish. Like I don't know if you caught this, but he actually quoted the house that Jack built in this movie.
I didn't catch it, but when I was going to read it, I'm like, I missed that line somewhere because somebody brought it up, and I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah. So maybe there's again, I haven't seen the movie, so I'll have to wait till I see it. But like, it does seem like he has this fascination, even at like 20 years old or whatever, right? With sort of like, in this case, it's like the movie was about kids getting murdered, right? And so there was a lot of sort of connections to like a childlike mind or like the mind of a child, the simplicity of a child, the detective, that very kind of over the top, what was it, police chief?
Yes, yeah.
A lot of what he spoke was in either cliche or fairy tale.
The fairy tale is fascinating now that you bring it up. Like from what I've seen of his stuff, he does seem to play around with that a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's to say. I don't know. We'll have to kind of maybe keep that as like an open thing that we just explore as we go through this, because um, yeah, I don't really have too much else to say there other than I noticed it here a lot, especially the second time seeing it. Um,
No, I
but I
think
don't know
we're
if,
good. Yeah, I think we're good. I mean, it's a bold start, and I think that's one thing I really like about it. It doesn't feel like a first film, and I
mm-mm.
think that's very impressive to
Yeah,
not feel like a first film your first time out.
right. And then to make something that would absolutely be a first film for most people, following right
I
behind
guess
it.
we should go to that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, you want to jump over?
All right, so I guess we'll start with our second film, Epidemic, which this film will never let you forget the name of it. We'll get into that in a second. A director and a screenwriter write a screenplay together about a globally spreading epidemic. Unbeknownst to them, an outbreak develops around them in the real world. So, Chris, I would love to hear your thoughts because weirdly, I'm wondering if this film has aged better now that we've went through a pandemic or not.
Okay. Quickly, um, critics put this at 7,236.
So that's quite a bit less than the last one. So
Yeah,
that makes sense.
which right, I feel like is appropriate.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it's by Rise of Planet of the Apes, and I feel like,
I feel like Rise is a better movie.
yeah, me too. Um, okay, so Epidemic. The basic plot of this movie for me, the interesting part of, sorry, not the basic plot, the interesting part of this movie for me, I think what he was trying to do, right? Because in Element of a Crime, you see a detective who has a complicated relationship with the criminal, and the line between criminal and detective starts to blur as the detective kind of slips into this method that his mentor created, right, where he kind of like becomes the killer in order to catch the killer, and he sort of slips into this where he's like losing control. And then in Epidemic, you see a story about screenwriters trying to create an epidemic for the screen without realizing that they're actually currently living through an epidemic, right? Um, this one didn't have a narrator, I don't believe, which I was happy about. I don't like the way he uses narrators in these early movies. And I think the idea behind Epidemic is cool. I like that idea of these two kind of knucklehead, young writers trying to create this epidemic, not knowing they're living through one. The execution was, I don't know, to me, it left something to be desired. um, oh, you asked me about how it was post-COVID. I mean, it's interesting, right? He certainly has a lot of ideas in this movie that became uh, mm, consistent, I guess, with how
Yeah.
COVID played out, right? In terms of the way it spread and stuff.
Yeah. You know, I wonder too, because it's always hard now because I think a lot of times he's doing like a meta narrative. Like this is in its own way, it's being meta of life imitating art or whichever order that goes into. And here we're looking at that type of movie that's well before postmodernism that we would kind of know it more in the 90s because this is like tail end of the 80s where that's only kind of just beginning.
Yeah, I think this was
And
87.
yeah, so I mean we've have a few ideas of postmodernism and self-awareness and meta humor, but it's not as prevalent as it will become like
Hmm. Hmm.
9 years after this with
Hmm.
Scream and everything else. So it's fascinating and it's like it's but it is interesting that I feel like the filmmaking element takes such a step back, and I'm curious to know if it was just less money or if it was just something they wanted to do quickly. Like it just seems odd that you would have this movie like Element of the Crime, which puts a lot of work in its sets and and a lot of its world, and then you have Epidemic, which almost feels like a bigger type of movie. You know, noirs are famously cheap movies typically, and now you're doing kind of a epidemic type movie that seems a whole lot cheaper. I don't know. It's just it's a fascinating way to see the progression.
So I was trying to figure that out. I was kind of wrestling with this, right? Because I mean, let's call it what it is. Like Kevin Smith could have shot that film and I wouldn't have been
Yeah.
surprised, right? Um, Going, especially coming from Element of Crime, which was like so well, like meticulously crafted. Um, but here's my guess. If I had to guess for Mr. LVT, I think he was playing with the tactile film itself with Element of Crime, like how the film looked, right? Like what happened on camera, what could be done through visually to make the story visually interesting, and maybe some story elements. But I think his he if I think of these first three movies as him like playing around a little bit before he kind of found his voice, because just wait till you get to breaking the waves or whatever, breaking of the waves or whatever, like that movie feels like a Von Trier movie. It's like, I don't want to get too far ahead, but it's like we kind of go through this and then all of a sudden it's like bam, this is like, okay, he's arrived. So I view these first three movies as sort of him playing around, and I think what he was doing with this one was playing around with narrative and kind of playing around with um, how to use like comedy in a movie, and like just more of like from the story perspective and less focus on the way it looked.
And
Um,
he's real obsessed too. I noticed with all three of these films with the idea of adding color in when in almost a black and white setting or something similar. Like, I mean, we have the title of the movie just there in a red color from basically beginning to end.
right. It's almost like a watermark or something, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's supposed to be kind of the purpose of it. It's an odd choice. It's not distracting because they do blend it well, where it's not just a bright red all the way through. Like, the way people interact, like with the scene, it'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
slightly change hue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously thought out. I'm just not always sure. Like, what is he going for there? Like, what is the purpose of this?
It's a visual cue. I mean, sorry, this is not an answer. I'm just kind of trying to think of this with you. Like, it's a visual cue, I guess, right? Because when
Yeah.
they're writing, it's not there, right? It's only when it's like the movie part.
Mhm.
Am I right in that?
I think so. At least, or he at least hides it better
Or
during
hides
those
it better.
scenes. Yeah, I don't know if I wish I could go back and reference it right now. It's
I
either he
don't.
hides it better or he gets rid of it altogether.
Yeah, I don't think it's there when they're writing the movie. I think that's his way of indicating like this is the movie. Um, but then there's something about that now that you're saying that I wonder if, because the last scene is supposed to be reality, not the movie, right? The way it
Right.
ends.
Correct.
And it'd be interesting. I wish I remembered this now. It would be interesting if the watermark was there in that scene, almost to kind of say like the two worlds are blending. But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, and I mean it's one of those movies too where it's got such an interesting premise to it, and I'm not sure it ever like commits hard enough to it. Like it's very experimental, and I think that's more the point of like what you're talking about, like just trying to figure things out. Um, because I don't think it's bad. It's definitely the least favorite I've seen of his stuff. So, well, no, I won't say that. We haven't got to uh Nymphomaniac yet. That'll definitely be at the bottom. That's fine.
For different reasons, though. This
Yeah,
one,
for
like,
very different reasons.
Nymphomaniac doesn't suffer from a lack of like filmmaking ability, right? That's like a
We'll get
um,
there. There'll be plenty to talk about with Nymphomaniac.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's first of all, he's an actor in this movie. I guess we should say that him and the writer of the film are two actors in the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't tell you if he did good or bad, and it was kind of on par with everybody else, I guess, at that point.
No, totally. I think this is almost like it's not quite surrealism, but I guess experimental, you said. That's probably the best way to say it, right? Because there's a lot of like slightly heightened thing that he adds in there. Like when people laugh, they don't just laugh, they kind of like laugh maniacally.
Yeah, everything's extreme. Everything feels like to its end, to its core, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
exactly. And like when there's like cysts bursting on a
Mhm.
woman who becomes infected, it's like it's very gross and very big, and like she's scratching them and there's like pus and it's like very like graphic, right? So, he doesn't shy away from anything. That's the only thing from this movie that I kind of pulled from like where he would go in his career is like when he needs to make an impact in this movie, he does, and like he doesn't shy away from anything. Uh,
And yeah, he never wonders, is this too much? Because like that woman screams forever. My
yeah,
girlfriend
exactly.
came out and was like, "What are you watching?"
No, no, totally. It's like 2 minutes or something. Yeah. I mean, good on her. I hope she didn't have to do that in more than one take. Or maybe they did it in post or something. I don't know. But um, his Dogma 95 thing is not there yet, right? This is just him sort of like playing, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of goes in that thing where we talked about it, I think, a little bit before we started recording, but it's things like this where I'm like, I don't think he quite takes himself as seriously as people thinks he does, because I don't think he thought too seriously about this. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just think it was like you said, he's playing around. He's trying to figure things out. And I mean, for a lot of these guys, and you talk about there's not much of a Denmark film stuff. I'm sure he didn't have a film school to go to, or if he did, it wasn't like an American type film school.
It's actually a really interesting thing to kind of look up. Um, I wonder if it talks about film school because it definitely seems like he went like it. Well, I mean, I
He'd
guess
been
it's
making
possible.
shorts since the 60s. So, I mean, I just assumed that was part of it too. Like,
Yeah.
he'd been making shorts for so long.
No way. So it turns out he was a child actor in Denmark.
Oh, that's right. I did see that when I was looking him up.
So he's just been like around movies forever and TV and stuff.
I can't remember what it said. He was in a pretty big like show or something too for like Denmark or something, I think is what I was reading. But yeah, now that you mention it, I remember that now.
Hmm. What is it with these child actors, man? They
Yeah.
like they always get screwed up somehow.
I mean, I guess he's
So
putting his out in film, I guess.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did. So I guess there is a film school called the National Film School of Denmark where he went to.
Oh, that's good. Like I said, where you were naming like there were so few, I was like, I can't imagine that's a very full school.
Right. Yeah, that's true. His name, the Von in his name was something he added, because he liked directors like Eric von Stroheim and Josef von Sternberg. So he
It's like,
just
is that
added
did he
that.
do it after the next movie when he has Max von Sydow?
Probably. Probably. The interesting thing was, so he went from uh, film school. Mm, let's see when he went. Okay, anyways, let's see, 60, 56 to, what's 24 years after 56, 1980, right?
Yeah.
So 1980, 1981, he graduated. And then 1984, he was nominated for a Palme d'Or. Like
Like
his,
before he does it for his next film, like before
yeah, Element of
Europa.
Crime was
Interesting.
nominated for, I mean, it didn't win, but like he got 12 award, he got a technical grand prize at Cannes and
That
was
makes
nominated
sense.
for,
I could believe, yeah, like because he did everything in camera and stuff. Yeah, I bet he did. That's
yeah.
it's
And
awesome.
so like, I mean, he was like immediately just sort of well known.
And so
Um,
it's even more perplexing why he would kind of. I guess it's just that it's just how he is. Like to go like this, you'd almost think you'd like. I would be in like a state of panic. Like, oh my god, I just got nominated for a prestigious award. What do I do next? Like, how do I
right.
not screw this up? And I mean, I don't want to sit here and pretend like Epidemic is this terrible movie. It's fine, from what I understand, like from what I gathered from it. But it's just it was kind of an odd going from one to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he went, so he used, it's the first time he used Udo Kier, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So he was, I mean, he certainly like leveraged that exposure at Cannes. Um, the Udo Kier is hilarious too, where they just go visit Germany. He's just like chilling in a hotel telling them
And he has
stories.
hair. It like wigs me out now. I'm like, I haven't seen him with hair in years.
Right. And then we're not gonna watch this because I think it's a TV show or a TV movie, but he did a movie for TV that was based on a Dreyer screenplay starring
Okay.
Udo Kier called Medea, which I was laughing because I was like Tyler Perry's Medea. Um,
Yeah, he does
but
that right after this, I think. I think that's like his next movie before he does Europa.
I think so. So he certainly seems like he's kind of using his fame to get stuff done. But I agree with you. Like it's interesting that with that, he would choose to do something so stripped down and basic as Epidemic.
But I
Um,
do want to ask you something. Have you seen The Sopranos?
yeah.
I swear, what's his name stole the opening credit idea from this movie. I have no way to prove it, but when they're like in the car and they're showing like the way things are outside, it's handheld. I was like, this looks just like The Sopranos opening.
Oh,
Like
that's wild. I
I
mean,
was sitting there, I was like, this just looks like The Sopranos, but in Denmark.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the people that made The Sopranos were huge film buffs, right? Or are huge film buffs.
Yeah, it would just be
So
such a random movie. Say, dude, did you see that movie Epidemic? No, no, the other one. Like that would be totally cool for opening. Say, I'm sure it's probably just a coincidence, but I was watching. I'm like, this is eerily close.
yeah, that's I wouldn't have made that connection, but now that you say it, you're exactly right. Um, I mean, I don't know, honestly, like I have a lot to say on Europa, but I don't know if I have too much else to say on this. I think it's, he's playing with like narrative, right? And he has like these two narratives that kind of converge in a way that's interesting. Um, it I wouldn't say this feels like a Lars von Trier movie that I kind of know, but I didn't hate it. I don't know what I'm gonna end up giving it. 3 stars, 2.5 stars, something like that. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah, like there's little bits of him in there. One thing I kind of noticed since the other one is, I don't know, maybe post-apocalyptic. I don't know. It's not very specific. And then this one has the epidemic going on. He has a lot of like, you kind of get his worldview of how apathetic he thinks people are. And I mean, he may not be wrong. Like all this stuff is going on and it never feels like anyone cares all that much. Like you have this going on and then you have like a regular noir story just going on and elements of a crime, and then you have this and you're like, I don't feel like anybody cares all that much.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like I almost
Like,
feel like he finds people very apathetic.
hmm, like he kind of shoots it in a way that's, yeah, okay. I mean, I can see that. Yeah, that's interesting. Especially in Epidemic for sure. And I'm just trying to think about element of crime because we don't really get the point of view of like the general public in element of crime, right? Everything but the tone of that movie is, other than the very like histrionic police chief, everybody else in element of crime is like very kind of monotone, right? And sort
Yeah,
of,
like the world's falling apart. And I mean, serial
yeah.
killers are, important to figure out, but it's like I almost feel like we have more pressing issues going on outside right now. Like we have stalker going on and everybody's like, we need to solve this crime. And it's like, okay.
Yeah,
I feel like
right,
there's more
right, right,
important things going on right now, but that's cool.
right. That's interesting. I think it's there in element of crime and like very there in epidemic because
Yeah.
basically like the you're that's a great observation because basically like the last I don't know 2 minutes or whatever of epidemic is when everything kind of comes into focus about what's going on, but like up until that point it's really just like these two chuckleheads kind of going about trying to make a movie and then like showing that movie, right?
Yeah, like they have, and obviously the whole point is they don't know, but part of it's like, I don't know. Like I was like, would they care all that much if it did? Like if they did know, or would it just be like, I don't know. I feel like he can kind of be cynical about art, but this is always the hard part when you've seen stuff ahead. When you're doing this chronological going back, you're like, am I just connecting stuff of his
Hmm.
later, or
Uh-huh.
is it already there? Or that's when it kind of gets a little hard. But yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of this will like show up later.
Yeah. Hey, here's a question for you before we move on, I guess. Now that we're talking about it, one thing I'm kind of struggling with a little bit, um, with Element of Crime, the question of like, okay, then so what doesn't really matter because it's like a genre movie, right? So kind
Yeah.
of like he's making it because it's a genre movie and like he's having his play on his take on like a genre film, right?
Mhm.
So fine, I get that. But like why this movie? Like why did he want to tell the story this way? Like Are there any clues within the movie itself as to like why he wanted to tell the story this way? Because I don't really know. Now that I like step back and think about it, I can't really figure out the point of the movie.
Are we talking about Element of a Crime or Epidemic?
I'm sorry, I'm switching back to Epidemic now. Element of Crime, I kind of get just in the sense of like he just wanted to make a cool genre film, and I think he did it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But this one, Epidemic, I don't know that I fully get like why he would have made this. Because it's not quite a horror movie. Actually, let me
Oh, we're
while
gonna check.
you're
They shoot zombies. Let's see.
yeah, let me go check that. But what do you think? Like just while I'm checking, can you think of at all like what the point of this movie is?
And I guess that's kind of where I struggle because, like, as much as I keep picking on like Nymphomaniac, I get the point of that movie. Like, I understand why he made it, even though I
Right.
think it sucks. Like, I get it. This one, and that's the thing. It's like it's a fine movie, but I don't really understand either what he's ultimately trying to say besides like life imitates art, art imitates life, that sort of thing. But I don't know. That just seems almost cliche. And
Hmm.
when you look at something like Element of a Crime, it's the whole point is to like deconstruct and noir. It doesn't really feel like he's deconstructing anything here. He doesn't
Yeah.
feel like he's taking these ideas and doing something necessarily interesting with them.
Yeah, I agree. Um, it is not on. Oh, funny enough, Element of Crime is on They Shoot
What?
Zombies.
What?
Yeah.
What number is it? What number is
12. No, I'm just kidding. Um, it's like 3,000.
it?
But
Okay.
you know what's funny is that wait,
Now, Mandy at least
1950?
makes sense.
No, but 1952, Mandy?
What is that?
I don't know. We have to do an episode of Mandy movies. Anyways, never mind. That's not relevant then if it's a different Mandy. Element of Crime is 3505. Dancer of the Dark is technically They Shoot Zombies. Melancholia is on They Shoot Zombies. That movie is not a horror movie. I'm sorry. The Idiots.
It has to be there because of the end of the world plot. That is the only reason it would be there.
I guess so.
But even that,
Anyways.
it's like not a traditional disaster. I don't know. We'll get into Melancholia.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
It's its own sort of thing. Um,
that just as a spoiler, I hated Melancholia
oh,
the
that's gonna
first
be.
time I saw
I
it.
would say, oh, this is gonna be an interesting conversation because I love Melancholia.
Well, I'll watch it again because the first time I sat through it, I was just like, shoot me in the head. I hate this so much. So anyways, we'll see if it warms up on second viewing. But um, yeah, cool. I guess we don't have to understand the point. I'm gonna go with your take. It's just life imitates art because that's kind of the most interesting thing that I can think of. So that'll be the official stamp of They Live by Film.
That works for me. I guess we can. Let's talk about something quite a bit interesting. We can go for his
Re-
third feature film. We'll hit him into
Return
the
of the King,
90s.
the
Yes, Return of the
trilogy.
King. Yes. We're going to talk about Europa. This is a long one, of course. Post-war Germany, 1945. Leopold Kessler, an American of the German descent, works as a sleeping car conductor for the Zentropa railway line. There we go. When he meets Catherine Hartman, the railroad owner's daughter, and they fall in love, his life intersects with the dark and violent past of a mysterious organization opposed to the United States Army's military occupation. Man, Letterbox is really got to get shorter synopsis. This log line, guys, log line.
The
um,
the irony of that, because most letterbox reviews are like, "Lol, he farted," you know.
but it seems like the ones we do, it's like here's the entire movie. But anyway, I want to hear this one should be higher than the other two. I'm gonna be a little upset if it's not.
It's quite a bit higher actually.
Good. Good.
It's 1,616.
Okay.
So
I
it's
rated this
right.
one pretty highly, but I can at least accept that as long as it's higher than the first two.
Yeah, it's right next to The Sixth Sense. It's like directly next, just slightly below The Sixth Sense.
I can live with that. Yeah, I can live with that.
Um, I I have a pretty big opinion on this movie, so I'd love to hear you go first. Like, how was Europa for you?
Oh, I loved it. Like I really didn't, after the first two, I was just like, I'm here just to kind of get my introduction.
Yeah.
I know this
Uh-huh.
gets so much better. And I was like, I know the last one, I wasn't crazy about Epidemic. And this one just kind of like blew me away. I was like, this movie is gorgeous. Like the cinematography just looks like the black and white cinematography and those moments of color. I was like, man, Spielberg liked this so much he stole it for Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Like, great for him. I mean, seriously, I feel like I feel like I'll overgush on this movie, but I was so impressed by how good it was.
Then we can just sit here and Jack von Trier off together because this movie absolutely floored me. Like the way the story was told, the feel of the movie, visually what he did. It had that like Night of the Hunter vibe where it was like kind of this like hyper reality kind of thing.
Yes, it has like such a like a classic 50s vibe to the whole thing, like the way
Yeah,
the music is scored and
yeah.
everything. It's very like 40s and 50s.
I'm gonna say like this is the double feature you do with Night of the Hunter from like in terms of even like the role of kids in the movie, like kind of like dark, but but it's like not quite a fairy tale. Like Night of the Hunter is more of like a dark fairy tale, but this one it kind of had that vibe to it. I think a little bit. Like I don't know. I was saying in the chat, when we have the Discord, I was saying it's like Sin City.
Yeah, like you I didn't read that till after I watched the movie and I was like, dude, it really is. Like, but I'd say it has like more purpose with the color. Like I love
Yeah,
Sin City. I'm not here to trash Sin City, but a lot of it is visual flair. It's like,
yeah,
is there a reason Clive Owens' shoes are red in this? No, it just looks pretty cool. And we don't want it to look completely black and white.
right.
So we're gonna put his shoes red. This one, like every time color came in, it felt very impactful.
Yeah.
Like I'm supposed to get like I don't want to spoil. I'm gonna keep this vague because I think people should watch this and I won't spoil it too much. When he does that overshot of the room and the hallway where the water with the blood in it is going underneath the doorway,
Oh my
that is
gosh.
gorgeous. Like that is what he's good at. This really disturbing imagery that looks weirdly beautiful.
It's almost as beautiful as the underwater scene in Night of the Hunter, not to keep going back there.
Yeah, I
But
mean it's so thoughtful. It's a very thoughtful shot.
yeah. Okay, so just to take a step back, Europa is essentially about this. It's a funny premise. Like if you just write it on paper, it's kind of a funny premise, right? It's like this American kid, basically, like young adult, being sent to Germany in 1945 for a job.
Mhm.
And you don't really know why at first. And so naturally there's like he gets a lot of shit from the Germans, like you're pretty brave to come over here and look for a job. you know. And so the premise of the movie, just like the basic kind of like one-liner idea, I think is kind of funny, kind of like dark humor.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that in this movie anyway. Like for a movie that's talking about really a time we don't talk about a lot, like Reconstruction era of World War II, because
Yeah.
we kind of get the bombing of Japan, and then it turns into, and then everyone had good economies. But there's some
Right, right.
time in there before we get there, but we don't really talk about it as much.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so here's a random tie then, because the Battles Without Honor and Humanity movies do a pretty good job of that for Japan,
Yeah, yeah, they do. That's a good example.
right? And then now
Yeah.
this one does a pretty good job of that for Germany.
Yeah, and I did want to read a quote because I think you'll appreciate this. I read this from an Italian critic. I'm going to pull up his name because I
Oh,
thought
please
it
tell
was.
me it's all in Italian.
Yeah, you think I'm going to read in Italian? Not quite. I'll try to find the Italian thing just for you. Europa 91. But I thought he summed up because you were talking about how you always kind of thought of Trier as German almost, and it's because he
Mhm.
does talk a lot about German stuff, and of course he has Udo Kier, who's German.
Right.
Um, it was Morando Moradani writes, more than the characters, what counts is the technical formalistic apparatus, color contracted with black and white, supreme imposed, distorted lenses, dynamic camera, expressionistic style set designs, anti-German in substance. It is profoundly German in form. And I was like, man, that sentence is so good, and it reminds me why I will never be a published critic, because that sums up this movie better than I could.
Yeah, seriously, let's just bring him onto the show to talk
Yeah,
about
like yeah. But yeah, it's
it.
that idea that it is almost like German expressionism at sometimes, like
Mm.
how the shadows and everything go. And
There's there's a Now that you said shadows, there's a particular image. I don't know if you remember this, but it's kind of near the end of the movie. He's in a room with his love interest,
Mhm.
and he's holding like a candle or a flashlight or something,
Yeah. Hmm.
and he shuts it off, and he's fully in shadow for about 3 seconds. And it's just freaking amazing. And then he steps into like a little bit of light, and you see him again. But um, yeah, if each movie in this like first trilogy is sort of like him experimenting with things, I feel like this is the first one where it kind of seems like he's coming together, where the story and the visuals kind of match each other in excellence, and like he's starting to kind of form an identity, even though this one still is not quite as fucked up as he like gets into. If you think about the ideas in this movie, they're still pretty intense.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up too, that it's almost like the experiment is, can I go against my instincts and do something kind of different? Like, because it feels so different in a lot of ways to what I would expect from him.
Totally.
Yeah, because I mean, especially when we get to like breaking the waves and everything else, it's like those feel so different to this.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen Breaking the Waves?
I've seen pieces of it. I've
Oh,
seen
cool.
a
Okay. Okay.
decent
Yeah.
amount. I haven't
So
seen
you
the whole
have
thing from beginning to end though.
It's okay. Yeah. So you have an idea of what I'm talking about. That
Yeah.
one feels a little bit more like a Von Trier film, right? And then all of a sudden, but this one is like, if you had told me Guillermo del Toro made this or something, I would kind of believe it, right?
Yeah, yeah, because it does do a little bit of that. We talked about Night of the Hunter, that kind of fairy tale thing. Like I think of the church, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, like how the church is shot in the snow when they're getting married and stuff like that. And I just think it's so gorgeous. It's such an extreme visual.
Yeah.
And especially because
Right.
I don't know if this is controversial or not. I don't think of Von Trier as a very cinematic filmmaker. Not that he's a bad filmmaker. I just don't think. I think some of his stuff purposely looks almost television like in a way.
I totally understand why you say that, but I'll be interested to watch Dancer in the Dark again with you, because there's some
Yeah.
shots in there that I think rival some of like the best of old Hollywood.
Yeah,
Um,
I know he's definitely capable. I mean, this even proves how capable he is. I think it's just I think he likes the groundedness almost of television.
well, no, I mean it's I think it's kind of baked into Dogma 95 almost, right? Because it's just very like I don't know if television is the word. I mean like I know exactly what you mean is all I'm trying to say. It feels like
Yeah.
he just
Television may
doesn't
not be the right
care.
comparison. It's just like there's a flatness to it,
Yeah, it's
like
almost
a
just like he doesn't
realness.
care. It's like
Yeah.
it's almost like that period Soderbergh went through where he was shooting on, handheld cameras or something.
Yeah. It's
Like
raw. I guess the word is raw.
yeah.
Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
feel like overly polished. It is like almost matter of fact
Yeah,
in like what
right.
it's showing.
Compared to this, which is so ornate
Mhm.
and like meticulous, right? And beautiful.
Yeah, like he's like, I am here to make a beautiful looking picture, which I
Yeah.
don't think is necessarily his concern a lot of times. I think he likes the drama and the disturbingness and the even the humor more than he necessarily always cares about like, does this look good?
Yeah. One of the things that shows up later in his movies that I don't think I've seen yet in these first three is he's a surprisingly empathetic person, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like I think a lot of the pain in his movies comes from an understanding of what brings people joy and like showing like the opposite of that, right? Like he's
how
very
miserable we can be.
yeah. Um, but I don't I think he's detached from that in these first three.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that because even though this one I think does have a lot of like emotion to it, it's almost like observational, almost
Yeah,
like the idea that let's take a more nuanced look at Germany in 1945. Let's do that
what like
versus
no, just building on what you're saying. I think the way you phrase that kind of came this idea came to mind of it's almost like a kind of a fucked up German Wes Anderson or Danish Wes Anderson. Some of the shots.
yeah, yeah, like it's very. I wish I could think of the right word for it. There's a word for it, and I feel like it paints a perfect picture if I could think of it. But yeah, I know exactly what you're trying to say. And
Like this the scene where that kid gets shot.
dude, that scene is like that I was already interested in the movie, and I think that's like when I like got up a little bit, I'm like, oh man, the mayor's gonna get shot.
Yeah. And the way he did it was like perfect, right? Because you see this fairly, I mean, at least he's portrayed early on as this fairly innocent, like American guy. You don't really know why he's there. He's kind of just like fallen into this really complex world and not understanding all the nuances, right? Um, and then you see that this kid like pick up a gun and start shooting Germans, and then it all happens off screen, so you see it through the eyes of the main character. I think is the perfect choice. It's very powerful.
Yeah, and especially because the character has like this weird connection because obviously like the U.S. and Germany were obviously against each other in World War II, but he has this connection to both. Like he has this very unique connection to where obviously he's an American citizen, and I think we can probably safely say he was not pro-Nazi, but Germany is still part of him, and I think him being the character almost like allows him to have this very nuanced look at what's going on.
Okay, that's a perfect segue into a question I had for you. So,
Okay.
do you think, I don't know if it's like the point, but like part of this movie, do you think it's Von Trier trying to insert some nuance into Germans in 1945 as opposed to Nazis, and kind of saying like, they weren't all bad?
I mean, I think it really just comes down to it's so easy to sit there and look at Germany in 1939 to 45 and say they were Nazis because they were under the Third Reich. But that wasn't true. Even if they had like maybe even some form of racism to them, they weren't Nazis. They maybe they had their prejudices, or maybe they did or didn't, but they were still not inhumane Nazis.
Right.
And I think it's a look at it what the world thinks. I mean, who doesn't think that? Who doesn't think of 1944 Germany and say Nazis? And it's
I
like
mean,
these are people who had to rebuild a country that was about to be taken away from them in a lot of ways. They're
right.
about to separate Berlin down the middle.
Well, this is the complicated thing about the Nazi Party in 1939, right? Is like, or even in the 30s, like early 30s, is like the country was in ruins, and this guy came along who basically like said he was going to rebuild the country and then did. And
Yeah,
for
I
a
mean I was just gonna say yeah because we were at the point where like I know they weren't called the Allies. I'm really blanking on what the
Axis.
no, not the Axis. It was the World War I, because in World War
Oh,
One we like basically that side screwed over Germany about as hardcore as they could. Like that was
right,
the whole point, was to put them in ruins.
right. And so this personality came along and said like, I've got you, I'll put you on my back, and like we're going to rebuild this country together. And then he did it, and it's like, so people were kind of already into this dude, and then he's just like, and by the way, white is the only race and all this shit, and then people are like, wait, hold on, I don't know if I can fully follow you there,
Yeah,
like
like you
it's
might have lost me a couple steps back.
right. It's like, but being in there, I imagine it was very complicated because like you didn't have food, and then like 3 years later you had food, right? Like there was
What do you do for
significant.
your family? What do you do? What do you put up with to live essentially? Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
like
and
there's jobs again and like all this stuff. And then you're like, well, okay, fine, this dude's a little wacky. And then all of a sudden he's like trying to take over the world. At what point are you like, whoa, whoa, whoa? Like,
and then by that point you can't leave. It's not like they're going to let you leave,
right,
and so
right,
you're just like, all right, I guess, because I mean, where are you going to go?
right,
Like, what are you going to do?
right.
Escape to any of the countries he's currently invading? It's a very interesting look, and that's not to sit here and absolve anyone for
No, no,
their fears
certainly
toward
not.
Jewish people or anything like that, but it's also that just because they were German does not mean they were bad people.
Right, right. And there's that one scene in particular, and forgive me if I got if I misunderstood this scene, but near the end of the movie, there's like he uncovers like a part of the train that he had never seen before,
Mhm.
and it has all these like emaciated, scrawny, like sick people.
Yeah,
Is that Were those Germans or were those Jewish people? Do you remember?
I don't know if it says specifically, and
Okay.
I mean that may be the point, that how different would they look?
I-
You know,
in a country that's where everybody's starving and like it's kind of like a you're saying like in a country where everything's kind of destroyed, like could you even tell the difference if you came in?
yeah, I mean, especially because we know
Hmm.
a lot of Germans are coming, a lot of Jewish Germans are coming back. Like we have that scene where the guy comes up to the conductor, our main character, and is like, "Hey, tell my wife everything's fine." And he's like, "It's not." Like this looks terrible. And the guy's like, "Yeah, yeah, just tell her." And he's like, "Hey, just tell her that you told me." And he's like, "I can't see anything from the train." But that's the whole thing. Like you have all these people who are coming back who are German Jewish people, which
Hmm.
almost at this time could kind of feel like an oxymoron. It's not, but it almost feels like an oxymoron because it's like, oh, you have these like people who the Germans tried to kill, and they are German at the end
Yeah,
of the day. They're
ethnically
German
German.
people,
Right.
and they're still having to go back to a country that essentially hated them.
Yeah. Right. And see, this is where it gets complicated because, like, especially with some of the comments Von Trier made recently, which I think I agree with you. Like, I think it was done to be controversial and
I think he's a little bit
provocative,
of a
and
troll. Like that's kind of what
yeah,
I got. He's just a little bit of a troll.
right, um, right. He probably chose the wrong topic, but
Chose
like,
the wrong time to do it, but I mean,
um, who knows if he's actually anti-Semitic? I mean, this movie it certainly would seem like he's not. Um, but you know, it's always complicated. You know, I always feel uncomfortable talking about movies that try to portray a nuanced look at Nazi Germany and saying like they weren't all bad and stuff, right? Because it's like that's true, but you have
is
to
it
be
worth
careful.
saying? Is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
is it's like there's that thing. I've seen it as a joke so many times where people talk about like, well, they weren't technically a pedophile, they were like, I think we talked about this during Lolita.
Oh
They're,
yeah,
yeah, and
the
it's like,
different
is it
names.
is it worth defending that? Like it's like it's true, but should you do it?
Right, exactly. Um, s- so I don't know what it's like to be Danish in that time because he was born in 56, which means his parents would have certainly lived through like all that, right? So
Yeah, he grew up I don't know if like in the US that's a time of a little bit more prosperity. I don't know if it's the same there. I would kind of assume it may be. But it may not be.
yeah.
I'm not really sure, to be honest.
I mean, maybe by the time he was like 10, right? At the
Yeah.
60s. I mean, at some point I think Europe was doing fairly well, but I just mean like his parents would have had such a different relationship to that being literally like next to Germany that whole time, right?
Yeah, I mean, they lived in fear. Who knows? I mean, I don't want to speak for people I don't know, but I assume if they were in the country, they had to live in some form of fear. You have
Sure.
some crazy dude who wants to take over the entire continent. So,
Sure. I mean, there's super interesting stories in the southern part of Norway about that, right? Because
and I
for a
assume there's
time,
refugees too. Like, I'm sure they had to deal with like the refugees in the area, which may, I don't know, just a guess, could put like why there's more a nuanced look here because they had to deal with Germans who were
yeah,
escaping the country.
right. That's a great point. Yeah, they probably knew people that were German and not approved of what was going on. Um, anyways, so I don't know if there's too much else to say on that point. I mean, I think he tries to bring in some nuance. There's a lot of discussion, which I think I would probably pick up on better the second viewing, from German folks, kind of about like living through that time and what it means to be German, and a lot of things that were, I don't want to say went over my head. It's just like I was just so absorbed in the visuals and what was happening that like some of that stuff I just was kind of not even really, the dialogue kind of just I missed sometimes. Um,
And it
but
doesn't help
it.
that sometimes it's 80 yard. I did notice that with like the Colonel, what's his name, Colonel Harris, the American.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
could tell
mhm,
his stuff was 80 yard, like
mhm.
hardcore. I was like, so sometimes I couldn't catch it because I was looking at his lips, and I'm like, oh, they don't quite match.
Also, what's the deal with Eddie Constantine? Why is he in like so many European movies? I
He
think that
kept
dude
busy.
just, yeah, he must have just kind of left the US and never come back. What a great life. Um, but if Element of the Crime was a little bit about, or had a theme of a detective kind of merging with the life of a criminal and those becoming harder to discern, Epidemic was, had this idea of like the writer and the reality kind of converging. What was there any theme here? I'm trying to, I guess the question behind the question here is like, why is this a trilogy, right? And I think what I want to do is I want to link it to this being a movie about, first of all, Europe, I guess, but um, more like I want this to be a trilogy about, from like a narrative perspective, where like the things that people are fighting kind of they accidentally kind of become, right? And I think that
Yeah.
happens here at the end of this as well, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I know a lot of it's to deal with like European trauma, but they're done in such different eras. Like, you have the first one, which is something in the future, maybe, sort of, kind of, and then you have the middle one, which I guess is more present day, like a present day something, and then you have this one, that of course is a real event, real, not specific, but the event itself is real afterwards, and that's kind of what makes it hard to link. And I'm not sure if you might know this, has he specifically linked these, or is it like they just kind of link it because it's his three films before breaking the waves?
That's a great question. So this is called the Europa trilogy, right?
Yeah.
Or the Europe trilogy, something like that. And then there's a separate thing later in his career. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's like the something something American trilogy, and it's Dogville and Mandalay, and then one other one. I don't know, maybe Melancholia. I don't know. But so I don't know if it's him or critics trying to group together like his movies. Um, but I can't really think of a link other than they are about European trauma, I guess. I don't know that Element of Crime is obviously about European trauma. Maybe, I don't know, maybe metaphorically, or maybe I'm too dumb to get it.
I mean,
Um,
it's just because he like comes back to Europe and it's like a hellhole. And I guess that's
oh,
the, yeah.
okay, sure. No, that's cool. I get that. Um, but this idea that like in all three of the movies, the main character is like actively kind of like against something, or it is, on the opposite side, and then becomes that thing over time, or starts to converge towards that thing, is a theme, I guess. If you want to dig into, like, I was just trying to think of like how could these movies be related, right? Because I don't want to necessarily spoil Europa because I think it's worth watching, but he takes a surprise action in the third act of the movie that I think seems out of character for him. Um, and it seems like he just kind of becomes overwhelmed by like what is right and what is wrong, and like there's whole like werewolf themes that comes up
Mhm.
in the story, right? He kind of seems to get caught up in that a little bit, more than I would have expected early on.
Yeah, and it's almost like a fascination that just drives you. Like in the first one, we obviously have this murder that is like the driving force of that fascination. And then in the second one, in Epidemic, you have this fascination with the story and the epidemic that they're creating in this story. And then the third one, you kind of get this obsession with the werewolf and like what all's going on in this almost conspiratorial
Yeah,
thing of the rebuild. And I mean that's probably a stretch. I think you could probably do that with most movies because I mean most times it is some sort of fascination that drives the plot. But I mean that's kind of the hard part of like I get why, honestly, to me, like, and this could be a little cynical, I feel like they group these together because it's hard to sell some of the like at least one of these movies by themselves,
yeah,
and they're just like, let's just group them and
sure.
sell them.
I'm
Like
I'm fine with that
just
too.
yeah, it's like I get why Criterion does it. It's like, look, if we try to put Epidemic out by itself, nobody will buy it.
um, for sure, this was the best of the three for you.
Oh, 100%. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I picked on Epidemic, but I mean, I liked all of them to a degree. But this is definitely the one I would go back and rewatch, and I would probably rewatch Element of the Crime again. I don't think I'll rewatch Epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's not really a strong reason to. Like, I kind of, Epidemic, it's kind of like, I get it, right?
Yeah,
I think
I
Element
think I get it.
of, yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible. There's always something there. But like, Element of Crime was way better on a rewatch. Super interesting, I think. Um, Although I still found a lot of holes in it, as far as like the whole like fairy tale kind of connection was a bit confusing for me and
You know, and
whatever.
I'm going to be interested because I know we're doing the kingdom at like the end, and he obviously did this TV movie in between Epidemic and I almost wonder if TV helped him like become a stronger writer as far as like plotting, like made him a stronger plotter because TV kind of requires a lot more of that.
Okay, I'll be interested to see as we progress. I mean, if you want to watch Medea, if we can find it, I'm fine
I
to try to
couldn't
sneak
find
it
it.
in.
I was looking for it earlier. That's the
Okay,
only issue is I wish it was included in the set, but I don't think it was.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, what there's, you know how little I watch TV, although I'm not opposed to it. Um, but what I've always heard about it is it makes people very like efficient writers, right? Like they have to like condense ideas. They don't have that same long form style to like flesh out an idea. You have to be like very concise with it, right? Um, well, I mean, I guess for at least for episodic TV, I guess that's not true for some of the stuff that's coming out, where it's like a mini series. But um, so I don't know if that helped
And
him become
European
more.
television's its own thing. Like compared to American television, they just structure differently.
Oh, okay.
They basically like I mean, you look at like UK stuff, it's basically an hour and a half movie, and they're saying we're gonna make three of those and we're gonna call it a season. Welcome to television.
Yeah, you know what? That's so true. Even The Office. That's not quite exactly like what you just said, but the original Office comedy, it's like 6 episodes. Is season one. It's like a it's I don't know. Yeah, you're right. They don't do TV the same way that I guess Americans do, where it's like
Yeah, and I did mess up. I think I told you it was like 20 episodes of the Kingdom. The Kingdom is 13 episodes.
it's 13. Okay.
It's four for the first season, four for the second season, and five for the last season.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, it's a quick watch. I was like, I'm surprised it took me as long as it did to watch the first season of Kingdom because I felt like I watched it over a week.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I can't wait to see it. I mean, I'll see if I can find a copy of Medea just to see how that plays out. It'd be cool to see him do Carl Theodor Dreyer script and with Udo Kier in the lead. That'd be good. But
And
yeah,
if everybody's wondering why we're not doing the Kingdom next, it is because one, we want to do is all his features together, and this was very thoughtful, and two, it's because the movie trilogy doesn't come out till May, so we're having to wait it out so we can actually get it on Blu-ray.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm ready to kind of like summarize the first three. Is there anything I can't think of anything else from Europa, just other than to reiterate how much I freaking love it.
Yeah, I really like Adam. I know you're gonna listen to this eventually. If all these movies, there's probably not going to be many that interest you. I would say you might actually really like this one.
Oh, he would 100% like it.
Yeah, like watch this one. I'm not gonna ask you to watch like The House That Jack Built or Antichrist or anything. So trust me, I'm not here to set you up for failure.
Um, no, I actually thought about texting him after saw this and just being like, dude, watch this movie. Um, In fact, there's somebody that I watched a lot of movies with, and we chat a lot about it kind of in the background. And I texted her right after this, and I was like, put this on the must see list because it's just like, this is just like yeah, I don't know. This just feels like one of these historic, like must see type movies, like kind of important movies. I don't know how else to say it. It's just like all the, you know, all the comic book stuff that people kind of make fun of later on. Like he was doing it all, but he made it look beautiful and like important.
Yeah, and I would love to know. I might next time I watch it throw on the commentary because I think he's on the commentary on the set. I'd love to hear how like the tech on how he did this because some of it I'm like, how do you do that? Like that's really cool. Like he used to have smaller versions like the Tingler, where you had like a moment of color, and I'm sure that took them
Yeah,
forever to do in camera. But he
right.
did it so much in this. I was like, I'd love to know the process.
I, okay, maybe we should just take a second on that. And that's the thing that just like it just kind of floored me. Like it would start off in all black and white. One of the characters would become color, then they would go back to black and white. Sometimes without an edit, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, yeah, it would be seamless.
I just I don't know. I don't know enough about filmmaking to know. It just feels like magic.
Especially when you're dealing with like, today you can be like, oh well, you just put a black and white filter over it, you use an eraser tool to make sure you get the color back out. But I mean, he had to do this on film. I'm
Yeah.
guessing two different film stocks, like black and white and color. Like that's insane to me. Like the amount of work that probably took.
Yeah. I don't even really fully comprehend exactly. I mean, I generally understand what you mean, but like I don't even fully comprehend that idea. I think you're right. When I get home, I want to watch the commentary on this. Is it on the Curzon disc?
I know it was for Elements of a Crime. I have
Okay.
not checked to see if this one does. I think he did a commentary for a lot of them though.
Yeah, I was trying to, I mean, when we were kind of brainstorming on like who we could bring on as special guests, I went on and looked if there was anybody that did, like scholarly kind of commentary on this, but I was surprised that a lot of the commentaries were himself. So,
Yeah, I mean, as much as we talk about, he probably doesn't take himself too seriously. I do think Von Trier's number one fan is himself. I do think he's pretty proud of himself.
him and Cronenberg share that, huh? Oh, that's one we should have done. We should have done Cronenberg. Well, we'll see.
Next
Adam might.
time, when Adam has his second child, we will do Cronenberg.
We need to encourage fertility. Um, cool. So the only thing I guess in summary, and we've certainly touched on this, but like for me, these first three movies, the way that I'm always gonna kind of know them is it seems like Von Trier kind of figuring himself out, right? Like that's kind of how I viewed these. It's like he's just playing with things, he's experimenting, he's um, trying to find that style. He also seems like he was pretty confident early on because I don't know if this is true, but I was reading a story where he was so mad he didn't win Palme d'Or, even though he got nominated, that he like flipped off the judges and stormed out of the arena or
Yeah,
the
that was for
award.
this movie. Yeah, for I read that too for Europa.
Okay,
I'm
for
like,
Europa.
that's awesome. I kind of respect it.
Yeah, like just imagine being so like aware of yourself.
And I'm because you kind of know when you do that, you're like, I'm never gonna win. Like they'll never give me an award if I do
Right,
this.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. He strikes me having a little bit of Kanye syndrome,
Oh, he probably does. Absolutely.
whatever that disease is called. But oh, speaking of disease, not to get serious for a second, but I found out it's called, he has Parkinson's. That's what it is.
That's a tough disease. That really is.
Yeah,
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 that
yeah.
sucks. That sucks for
And
him. I really hate that.
yeah, and he's even said that it's possible he won't do a lot of other filmmaking. So, um, we're seeing the beginning of I guess this is maybe worth comparing to Kubrick since we've kind of done these director series back to back, and you already did a good job of bringing this up. I mean, it's interesting to me to see these filmmakers that kind of were just finding themselves early on, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because it's different now. Like I was thinking about this earlier. We talk about like Jordan Peele and his first three films, and or Eggers or Ari Aster and stuff like that.
right?
They make these really high end productions for their first films, and you look to these guys, and you're like, they didn't really have that opportunity, and it's like they kind of had to force their way through by either by being experimental or just doing what they could with what they had.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kubrick was what, his uncle who had like a dry cleaner or something funded his first two movies, or a bakery or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, pretty much.
And then Von Trier. I think the one nice thing about at least I know Sweden. I don't know. I'm assuming Denmark as well, but a lot of times the government will help fund basically like you can kind of like pitch a script to them and they'll fund a certain amount of movies every year. Like if you look at a lot of Bergman's movies, they were financed by this Svensk film industry, and I think Denmark has a similar kind of initiative towards funding this stuff.
And that may be
Um,
why he's like a little bit like hesitant to go like full what we kind of know of him, because he's like, the government will not fund me if I do
yeah,
Antichrist.
no, it's probably true. I mean, I think Breaking the Waves is pretty well. We'll get into it next time we record, but there's a pretty stark difference, I think, between what we've seen so far and then what he does over the next three films. So it'll be cool to revisit those. I don't think I've seen The Idiots before.
I have not. No, this would be
Okay.
new to me. But when
Okay.
we do that, so everyone's aware, I will go ahead when we do the next one. I will read the what his rules were for Dogma 95. So we kind of get a familiarity of what him and other filmmakers were doing. But Chris, while we're on that subject, so what will we be watching next week?
Yeah, so I thought we would do Michele Suave movies.
Oh,
No, just
okay.
kidding.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
No, yeah, so I think, I mean, the next three movies from Lars von Trier are Breaking the Waves, The Idiots, and Dancer in the Dark. Um, so let's watch those. I think what one thing that'll be different for those who have kind of stuck with us through these director runs, I think one thing that'll be different is there are some time sensitive interviews um, that we've committed to getting out due to like kind of tying it to release dates of releases. So, we'll probably break up the director's runs, and I'm not saying we have to do it every other week. There may be some weeks where we go back to back and some weeks where we have an interview in between. Um, this is coming right after the um, the Sam Deegan interview. So this, for those that just heard the Sam Deegan interview, the next one is most likely going to be either Agfa or Bleeding Skull, if I depending on if I can get Bleeding Skull recorded here in the next
I
two.
feel like since we did Denmark, you have to do Agfa now, since we talked about Refn.
Yeah, no, well, specifically Bleeding Skull tied to their release coming out in April. That
Yeah,
would be the
yeah.
only thing. We're trying to get that in if possible, that Friday, the April 5th. Um, so this one might be this director run might be broken up a little bit more than the Kubrick run. I think it also would be good to break it up just because there's five of these as opposed to I think three for Kubrick, or maybe four.
Yeah, it was 3 or 4. It was
But we're starting to get into like slightly longer filmographies and like um, I don't know. So I think it would
I can't wait till you tell me we're gonna do Nikkei.
hell yeah. That'd be
It'll take us a
for
year.
I was gonna say doing six every episode, it'll take us a year. Um, that'll yeah. Maybe we can do like shot on video Mike or something and just only have like 30 to go through.
Only 30. But thank you for everybody watching. For us, me and Chris doing this, I think it went pretty well. So we hope to see you guys back here in a couple weeks. Listen to some of our interviews. I'm sure Chris did fantastic on them. I'm looking forward to listening to them. And you guys have a good one.
Yeah, see you all around.